everybody, my name is Tanya and this is my October wrap up. So it's been quite an interrupted month in October in a number of ways. I had a trip to Sydney in kind of the middle of the month for a work conference. At the same time that was going on, my workplace actually shifted, and then a not so good thing that has affected me in the last couple of days. We got some very sad news about a co-worker on Friday, and I've just had a bit of a wallow weekend, and I've been watching a lot of Booktube, which has been fantastic because my watch later list needed it, but I haven't really felt all that up to reading since then, so it just, if I seem a bit off in this video, that's why. I'm still kind of processing. I'm fine, but it's just a bit to take in. So there's been a few factors at play this month, both really great and both really bad, and I've done some reading though, so let's get into talking about that. The first book I completed in the month was a carryover from September, and that was an audiobook, which was Assassin's Quest by Robin Hobb, which is the third book in the Farsi trilogy, and I have finally finished the Farsi trilogy, which I am super excited about. I was interested going into Assassin's Quest to see how it would go because I've heard some not so great things about that one. Obviously there's a lot of Robin Hobb love around Booktube, but in general Assassin's Quest has been touted as being way oversized. It could have been cut down hugely. I did actually really enjoy it. I was pleasantly surprised after all the negative that I had heard about it, but I do agree that the first half is very kind of samey, very whiny, very not too much happening. But stick with the first half. I think the second half is definitely better. We start introducing some more characters into it and seeing some more familiar faces instead of it being just very much Fitz one-on-one, Fitz the whole time. We get some variety with some other characters. I think that makes it a lot easier to bear. So I'm not going to talk too much about the plot of this one, obviously. It's the third in the series, but I think the ending was rather epic. Just kind of persevere through the first half, and I think it's worth it. The next book I completed was a buddy read, and that was The Dunwich Horror by H.P. Lovecraft, which I read with Alicia from Ex Libris. Neither of us really enjoyed this all that much, which is a shame. We had some really interesting discussion about it. This is a collection of short stories, and I found them all, well not all, there was some that stood out, but particularly at the start, like it was kind of just a rehashing of the same kind of themes and the same kind of storylines, and so it was all very samey and not much kind of difference to it. Also, through reading this, Alicia did some research on H.P. Lovecraft and found out that he's not necessarily the nicest of guys. He's a bit of a racist bigot, which I can distance myself from. Like, I think that definitely affected her more strongly than it did me. Also, that there is a sense of racism and some sexism through this book, which is definitely problematic. However, I am, for my own mind, generally able to, one, separate the artist from the art. Also, while it's not necessarily an excuse, I am able to accept books as a product of their time. As long as it's not setting out to actually viciously attack somebody or someone's race, then I don't have such an issue with it. Just because that's what life was like at that time, and I think it's important to acknowledge that, and then we can't make the same mistakes over and over if the literature there exists to show just how awful it was. My favourite story in this one by far was The Thing on the Doorstep. I think that one was definitely far above the others. The other thing with this is I didn't find any of it particularly scary reading this for Halloween, and I didn't find his style of writing particularly scary. I have read one book by H.P. Lovecraft in the past and didn't really get along with it, and thought it was the kind of thing that maybe I would enjoy, but it just wasn't the right time. Having read this one, I don't think H.P. Lovecraft is for me, and I don't think I'll be giving his a go anymore, but I'm glad to have kind of answered that question. The one that I've read previously is At the Mountains of Madness, which is kind of a novella-length story, I guess, and yeah, I found that one overly repetitive in certain phrases, and again, not particularly scary, and I just haven't connected with H.P. Lovecraft, and I think this is probably it for him. The next book I completed was a buddy read with Stephanie from Time to Read, and that was The Blank Wall by Elizabeth Sensei Holding. This is the second Stephanie book that I purchased recently, so it was really good to read this one. This turned out to be quite a lot of fun, which is kind of just what I needed at the time. This one is set in 1940s America, and it follows the story of a woman. Her husband is away in the Navy, I think, and she's got 2 teenage children. And it's kind of what happens when her young daughter starts seeing a quite unsuitable man. Now, when I talked about this in the haul that I did this one in, it talked about him as being an unattractive beau, and I took that literally as if he was really ugly. But that's not necessarily what it was talking about. It was more he was an unsuitable, unsavoury character, and so her trying to protect her daughter from this man, and something happens, and then there's kind of a mystery, and it kind of keeps going on, getting a little bit more and more ridiculous. It was, you know, over the top, melodramatic, and just really fun. And one last look, the end papers look like this. Next up, I finished an audiobook. After finishing with Assassin's Quest, I was tempted to go straight into the live ship books by Robin Hobb. I decided I would take a quick breather, before launching into another Robin Hobb world. And so I kind of had picked out a range of shorter books that happened to be on the 1001 Books You Must Read Before You Die list, because as I've spoken about before, I'm quite behind in what I wanted to get to for this year. So the next 2 things that I finished were actually audiobooks that were on the 1000 list. The first one I read was Thérèse Raquin by Émile Zola, and I've owned this for years. I have the audio version that was narrated by Kate Winslet, and I think she did a fantastic job. So this one follows the story of Thérèse, who is raised alongside her sickly cousin. When the two are older, Camille's mother decides that they should marry, and so Thérèse is married to Camille, who is still quite a, you know, sickly man. He's been raised as basically an invalid, so he acts in that way, and so Thérèse is, you know, kind of caught in this really boring lifestyle. She doesn't have any kind of fun, any kind of interaction that stimulates her, and into that comes an old friend of Camille, Laurent and Thérèse of course fall in love and come up with the plan of murdering Camille so they can be together. And I'm not going to go any further than that, but it kind of follows what happens from that point and the after effects that has, and it was really, really interesting, really, really fascinating, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. The second audiobook that I listened to was Felicia's Journey by William Trevor. This is my 3rd book by William Trevor, and I've listened to all 3 of them. The first one I listened to a few years back, I suppose now, was The Story of Lucy Gold, which I have mentioned before on my channel, and was absolutely phenomenal. Absolutely heartbreaking, horrendous, just wonderful. A few months back, I think kind of May, somewhere like that, I listened to another of his books. I listened to Fools of Fortune, which I just didn't quite connect with. I enjoyed it, but it wasn't at all on that same level of Lucy Gold for me, so it was kind of a disappointment. When I was looking for shorter 1000 books, I thought I'd give this one a go, and I'm so glad I did. I'm definitely back on the William Trevor train. This was just fascinating. So this one follows the story of Felicia, who is a young woman in, I think it was kind of 1990s Ireland. Felicia's mother died when she was younger, and so she kind of looks after the men of her family and does all the cooking and cleaning and looks after an elderly grandmother. Felicia leaves that life to follow a young man who she's been seeing over to England, but she doesn't know exactly where he is, only a town, and so she sets off without much money, totally alone, over there to try and find him. When she gets there, she is having trouble, and instead of finding Johnny, she is found by Mr. Hilditch, who is a overweight 50-something man who kind of likes collecting young women who are alone. And it goes from there. It is just completely fascinating. You don't know, reading it, just how sinister he's going to turn out to be or not. It's kind of a slow build in terms of what's going to happen. I didn't enjoy this one as much as Lucy Gold, but as I said, definitely firmly back on the William Trevor bandwagon. I've now read the 3 of his that are on the 1000 Books You Must Read Before You Die list, but I'll be definitely checking out more of his work in the future.